Guam is a small island in the Pacific that is written off constantly of being uneventful, but what many people do not realize is that we have a rich and rather complex history. When people describe Guam, words that are always used are tranquil, quiet, peaceful, but what I am going to discuss today does not fit these generalizations, but rather introduces us to the complex political conflicts between the Guam Congress and the U.S. Navy. It was a long uphill battle for the people, but the ramifications from these events are still felt today.
When I planned this revolt, this is not a revolt with arms, it's a peaceful revolt. Another refusal to do what the Navy tells you to do. Many of them, including the political leaders, says, no, we shouldn't do that. But I must say that I don't blame them. Remember 300 years of subjugation. It becomes part of you. You believe that you are here in this universe to be governed, and they're the people who give orders and we take orders. Judges will pull me back when I'm arguing for this movement. Oh, many of them, or they'll come and say, why can't we keep the military, the Navy, and still have a civil government? Those are contradictory terms. They can put a man without uniform. Does that make it a civilian administration?
What began the shaky relationship between the people of Guam and the Navy would have to be the creation of the Insular Cases in 1901. The Insular Cases were developed to explain what exactly was the status for the people living on the newly created U.S. territories. It used such phrases as alien races, and that the people living in the U.S. territories are incapable of understanding Anglo-Saxon principles. This meant the Constitution was not valid in the territories, and that the Navy was granted absolute power. The people of Guam would once again become compliant and be told what to do for many years. The people first showed interest in something more for them the same year the Insular Cases were introduced, when they expressed that they wished to do away with the military rule, and a few months later they requested citizenship that would not come to them for another 50 years. The only thing that the people were eventually provided with was the Guam Congress, but it only served as an advisory board and were only able to listen to what Congress told them. Events like the creation of the Bill of Rights for Guam, introduced by Governor Willis Bradley, was able to further move the people closer, but not all the way. In 1937, Baltazar Berdallo and Francisco B. Leon Guerrero went to Congress to petition for citizenship, and were even able to have Congress introduce the bill, but complete opposition from the Navy killed it. These decades of falling short for the people caused some to forget about it and just follow what they were told, but there were some who were still willing to take a stand for all, but they would first face opposition from the might of the Navy. After World War II, the naval government reasserted itself into Guam, and continuous petitions for citizenship were created, but to no avail. In 1948, however, the Chamorro people had seen a glimmer of hope when the governor at the time, Charles Pownall, granted the Guam Congress the ability to create their own laws with his approval, and allowed them to approve laws introduced by him as well. The people saw it as the beginning of changing times for them, but they later realized that it had changed nothing at all. Whenever the Congress introduced new legislation, Pownall would veto it with the backing of the Secretary of the Navy. In the next 2 years, things became even worse when continued military seizures of land resulted in 67% of land being held since the war, and a greatly unfair wage difference against the local workers in favor with the newly moved Americans. All of this reached its boiling point when the Guam Congress was investigating violations of a prohibition against Americans owning local businesses through frontmen, causing the Congress to subpoena Abe Goldstein for financing a woman's clothing store, but he did not come, bringing up the veto from Pownall, stopping the Guam Congress from having the power to subpoena Americans. The people in the Guam Congress began to develop the feeling that their voice did not matter to the naval government or the people of Congress in the U.S. Fueled by their resentment towards Pownall and the naval government, the Guam Congress decided to pass the Organic Act bill and the petition for citizenship they had been working on, and then adjourned until the U.S. Congress finally decided to do something. One of the assemblymen, Carlos Taitano, knew the power of the media, and a year earlier had met with 2 visiting reporters from the United Press International and the Associated Press, so he contacted them right after the walkout and the story spread to the mainland. The New York Times reported, Guam Assembly quits, and the next day, Congress walkout. So Pownall had tried to respond by having the Guam Congress meet for a special joint meeting, but nobody showed up, causing Pownall to remove all of them from office, which only caused even more outrage. 12 villages of Guam even met and decided that they would not recognize the replacements for the Guam Congress. Meanwhile, in the US, the news was prominent, and the Washington Post received a quote from Carlos Tsaitsuna stating the 3 grievances for the walkout: arbitrary rule by naval government, lack of a constitution or documents anywhere, and lack of a court of appeal beyond the Secretary of the Navy. The people within the US government knew they would have to work fast in getting everything under control, so President Harry S. Truman decided to have the State Department do an assessment, and they concluded that the administration of Guam should go over to the Department of Interior within the year. Truman approved the draft of the Organic Act for civilian government for Guam on May 14th and instructed the Navy to hand over administration within 12 months. Pownall decided to follow suit brought on from pressure in Washington and reinstalled the assemblymen to their seats. In May, the Guam Congress returned and decided to send F.B. Leon Guerrero and Antonio B. Wampat to Washington to lobby for the passage of an Organic Act. Finally, on September 1st, 1950, Truman signed the Organic Act of Guam into law and appointed Carlton Skinner as Guam's first civilian governor. The reason why the walkout was a success was because the people had the backing of the media who could spread the word to all of the people across the nation. Major news outlets picked up the story and began referring to it as Guam's Boston Tea Party. Images or words are something that inspire people and are what get people to join a cause. So the people of Guam got exactly what they needed because the Navy and the US government had to move fast to put an end to the problem. Had it not been for Carlos Tsaitsuna's quick thinking and having the media report what had happened, it would not have had as much of an impact and word of it would not have reached the US until much later. The people of Guam had become US citizens, but they would eventually face new problems in removing the security clearance on traveling in and out of Guam and allowing the actual people of Guam to elect their own governor. They would eventually be able to achieve these goals, and the future of Guam became a sign of hope. The Guam Congress walkout is probably one of the single most important events in all of Guam's long and rich history, and its effects can still be felt today here on the island. As the years progress, Guam has been able to move forward, but we are not exactly rid of any problems, because if you remember at the beginning of my documentary, I mentioned the insular cases, and the reason why I bring it up again is because as recent as 6 years ago, it was still considered to be a justifiable explanation as to why Guam and the rest of the US territories do not have the same rights as those born in the states. We also have a delegate in the House of Representatives, but her and the rest of the delegates from other US territories cannot vote on legislation. In conclusion, even though the walkout was a great leap in the right direction for Guam, have we truly reached where we want to be in terms of our relationship with the US? The answer may yet be found.